Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Capital View, a webcast brought to you by the Daily Journal and djournal.com, a webcast about state government, what's going on in Jackson. I'm your host, Brad Locke, along with Bobby Harrison, our Capitol Bureau Chief down there in Jackson. And Bobby, how are you on this rainy Monday? At least it's rainy up here.
It's rainy here some. Then right now it appears the sun's out, though, Brad. I don't know if we're going to get more rain. I guess we'll get more rain before the day's up, but I'm doing all right.
Well, lucky you got the sunshine. Yeah, it's come a monsoon over here last few minutes. We got a few things to talk about here, Bobby. Is the this current legislative term, I guess, kind of starting to wind down, getting to be crunch time, and I know we've got a new budget they're trying to put together by next week. And you had a good story in Sunday's Journal and at djournal.com. Y'all can find it there. Kind of about the lawmakers having to deal with a bunch of different moving parts. You got some possible tax cuts moving through, some bills there. And again, you're trying to get the budget figured out with that. And you got the revenue collections that are down and all that stuff, Bobby. So it's seems to be quite the challenge for the lawmakers to try to figure all this out.
Yeah, and don't forget the lottery, Brad. We still got the lottery hanging out there that could impact the budget or put more money in and provide more money for the state to when it gets around to enacting the budget. But most people think the lottery is a long shot at this point in time. But next Monday is deadline to have a budget passed. They're going to be working this coming weekend to try to get that budget deal in place, and then they'll try to pass it on Sunday and Monday, and then leave later on next week. As you said, there's a lot of moving parts. You have the House has an income tax cut that would, if it became law, according to estimates from the Department of Revenue, would take like $62 million out of the general fund for the upcoming budget year, which starts July 1st. The Senate has a larger income tax cut and also a business tax cut that would take a lot more money out of the general fund, but it would be phased in over 15 years. So the impact on the general fund would be slower coming, but then when it was finally enacted, it would take a lot more money out of the general fund than the House proposal would. So, I mean, the legislature is dealing with those issues. And then there's also the issue. Some people are still trying to look for ways to raise taxes for road and bridge improvements. So there's just so many moving parts coming down to the final days of the legislative session. And it's not clear at this point how everything's going to be worked out.
House Ways and Means Chair Jeff Smith from Columbus, he had originally said that these possible tax cuts would not really affect the budget for this year. Later kind of backtracked on that statement, I guess, Bobby. But he says that there's some provisions in place, I guess, where they could adjust the legislation to maybe lessen the impact, or I thought maybe at one point maybe even raise taxes. Correct me if I'm wrong.
He's one of the ones talking about cutting taxes and raising taxes for roads and bridges. And he originally said the income tax cut he proposed would not have an impact on the upcoming budget year, which starts on July 1st, because the income tax cut he proposed that passed the House would not go into effect until January 1st, 2017. But but if it did go into effect on January 1st, 2017, that would impact half of the upcoming budget year. So, which would be about $62 million impact according to the Department of Revenue. So, but he later said, well, we can fix that later in the process. So, as I said, that's just one of the many moving parts they're dealing with as they try to end this legislative session. And of course, over in the Senate, Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, who presides over the Senate, he is really adamant about a reduction in the business tax, what's known as the franchise tax, that most businesses pay on sort of their investments. They pay a tax on their investments, capital, and property, and he wants to eliminate that. So, and that would take about $265 million out of the general fund phased in over several years. And so some people think he's going to this is an issue that he's going to die in the ditch on, if you will, and sort of hold up all of the legislation, the budget, until that franchise tax is part of the final package. So we'll see what happens as it comes down to the final days.
Yeah, it seems like in a lot of ways when it comes to tax cuts, you've just got basically kind of an age-old argument. regarding, for instance, what Tate Reeves said, the lieutenant governor, that he believes his core philosophy is basically a modern Republican conservative philosophy that less taxes, less government, that can lead to economic stimulation. So that's kind of, I guess, the basic philosophical difference here at work, Bobby. But I think it's kind of complicated by the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, revenue collections have been down. People haven't quite been able to figure out why, and so I think that maybe doesn't make it so cut and dry in that respect, does it?
That's right. For the current fiscal year, revenue's down. The state's collecting a little less in revenue than it did the previous year. Now, saving grace is the Attorney General Jim Hood has settled several large lawsuits that's brought some unexpected money into the state coffers that is more than offsetting that reduction in tax collections. But if the state does finish this year collecting less in taxes than it did the previous year, that would be an unusual experience. It's only happened like 3 times since 1970. We're Mississippi is not doing as well as other states, not only in the Southeast but across the nation in collecting revenue. There's a lot of different theories on why that is, or whether let me strike that. There's not. I mean, there's a lot of questions about why that is. There's not many theories, but a lot of people are trying to figure out why the state is collecting, why the state revenue collections are so sluggish compared to those of the rest of the nation. And there's really not any good explanation other than the fact that since during the past 4-year term, the state the legislature did pass a number of tax cuts. They were real specific tax cuts targeting particular groups and not broad-based tax cuts like we're talking about this year. And but all those tax cuts totaled up would be about a $300 million hit on the general fund. So it was significant.
And what about that lottery, Bobby? Can I start planning on buying lottery tickets soon?
Well, I don't know. The legislation is alive and that would solve a lot of their and that would be a way, I guess, to at least, if you're going to reduce the franchise or eliminate the franchise tax, you could have the lottery revenue to offset that. But a lot of legislators, including apparently Governor Bryant and Lieutenant Governor Reeves, are philosophically opposed to the lottery. So most people believe it's not going to survive this legislative session, though it is alive at this point in time.
All right, Bobby, let's move on to charter schools. That's been a hot topic all session. Of course, had the charter school law passed in 2013, and there's been some revisions voted on. The Senate approved on Thursday by a narrow margin. Some changes to the charter school law would allow students in C, D, and F school districts to cross district lines to attend charter schools. So where do we kind of stand on this issue, Bobby? I know there was maybe something was going to happen with it today.
Well, I mean, today's the deadline. It was a narrow. It was much closer vote than what was expected. In past years, it's been the House that's been more reluctant to pass charter school legislation, and the Senate's been kind of gun ho in passing charter school legislation. But this what was considered minor expansion of the charter school law it was a surprisingly close vote last Thursday in the Senate. Now today is a deadline. Somebody could enter a motion to reconsider, and there'd have to be another vote on that legislation. If that motion is not entered today, then the bill will go on to the governor, Phil Bryant, who's expected to sign it. The current law, which was passed in 2013, as you said, limits charter schools to it doesn't. It puts in place provisions that in A, B, and C districts, the local boards have to sign off on a charter school before one can be located in those districts. And also doesn't allow students to cross district lines to attend charter school. Under this minor change that the Senate voted on this past Thursday, students in A, B, and C district could cross district lines to attend a charter school. So, and the important thing about, a key in this legislation is in the House, when it passed in committee, Charles Busby, representative from down on the coast in Pascagoula, a Republican, it's kind of been the House's point man on charter schools, told House Education Committee members that if this bill passed, this would be the last charter school legislation that was taken up during this 4-year term. So Busby sent the signal that this was about all the House was willing to do on charter schools, and they wanted to do this and wrap it up. So we'll see what happens today in the Senate, whether the motion to reconsider is entered and forcing the senators to vote on it again.
I guess this is one of those issues that tends to kind of go down partisan lines. But then you look at Northeast Mississippi, a lot of support for public schools up here, and you had Chad McMahon, the state senator, Republican from Tupelo. He kind of questions this need for this change to the bill. In fact, he seems to question the need of charter schools in general, saying there's really no evidence that these schools perform better than public schools, I guess. And I kind of just wonder how charter schools could even gain a foothold up in these parts.
Well, there's fewer lower performing school districts up in Northeast Mississippi that could allow charter schools without the local board's approval. There's a few, but not many.
Right.
And McMahon, what he was arguing, he's a freshman from Lee County, represents Lee County and a portion of most of Lee County and a portion of Itawamba County. He was saying that the charter school law that was passed in 2013 shouldn't be expanded until there was evidence of how well that 2013 law was working. So he was the only Republican to actually speak up. So a couple of Republicans voted no, but he was the only one to go to the well of the Senate and speak against the bill. So that was kind of a big deal.
All right, Bobby. So what are we looking at this week? What kind of things we're expecting to go down in the legislature?
Well, as we said, the work this week is going to be primarily on the budget and whatever tax cuts. Talk about tax cuts, and then you have some still a few key pieces of legislation out. Like there's the proposals out that would prohibit politicians from using their campaign finance money on personal expenses. That legislation is still alive and could be voted on in the coming days. But the main thing over the final days of the legislative session will be the budget and taxes and perhaps some bond legislation that would provide funds for construction on the state buildings on the universities and community college campuses.
All right, Bobby, that's now the segment of the show where we look at three things down there in particular at the Capitol: most impactful legislation, most impactful lawmaker, and strangest occurrence. So let's start with the most impactful legislation of this past week.
Well, I would have to say it's the.
I think I know the answer.
What's the answer? I'll let you.
House Bill 1523, maybe.
Oh, the bill limiting gay marriage. Yeah, we hadn't even talked about that, but I guess I'm trying to remember. I guess the governor signed it into law since we did this last time, Brad. So the bill would limit would limit the ability of the state to force businesses or to serve to help in serving. Providing products or services for gay weddings, and it would limit the prevent circuit clerks from having to issue gay marriage license to gay couples. So that bill has received a lot of national attention. A lot of business groups have come out against that bill and are calling for the governor to repeal it. Of course, it would take new legislation at this point in time to repeal it. So this bill, like it or not, is the law of the land, and probably is going to stay the law of the land until. For a while, unless it's overturned in the court system. And by the way, Attorney General Jim Hood says, his duty is to defend the state laws in court when lawsuits are filed against it. He said he would take each individual lawsuit on a case by case basis to whether he should defend it or how he should proceed. So there's just a lot of unanswered questions about this law.
Most impactful lawmaker.
Well, we were talking about the revenue a while ago and the impact that the House tax cut would have on the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And the person that brought this to light was House Appropriations Chair Herb Frierson. Frierson's he has been as Appropriations Chair, he's one of one of the most powerful people in the legislature, and he has at times butted heads with the folks on the revenue side who cut taxes and stuff. He's been a consistent voice in saying we don't need to be cutting taxes and taking money out of the general fund. And so he has been an impactful legislature, and it's kind of interesting in that he's been appointed by Governor Bryant to serve as the executive director of the Department of Revenue. So this will be his last term in the final days in the legislative process. And he's been an impactful legislator for a long time. He was within a couple of votes of being elected speaker back in 2012. I mean, going into 2012 session when Philip Gunn was elected. He finished second in the Republican conference when they were voting on who should be the next speaker. And he was, while that was a secret vote, most people say he was only trailed the Gunn by 1 or 2 votes. So he could very well have been the speaker of the House, and his impact. When he leaves, there'll be a key opening as appropriations chair. So it'll be interesting to see who Gunn names to that post. And then also he'll leave a void, and it'll be a question whether the next appropriations chair will be as active as he was in trying to curtail the amount of the tax cuts passed by the legislature.
And finally, the strangest occurrence down in Jackson the past week, Bobby.
Well, getting back to the charter school vote in the Senate last week, the vote was 24 for expanding the charter school law and 21 against. Now, if you add that up, that falls 7 votes less than 52, which is 52 members of the Senate. And this was a vote where a lot of members apparently did what is known as taking a walk. In other words, they got up and left before the vote, presumably because they did. Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves is a big proponent of charter schools, and a lot of the people who took a walk were key committee chairs who presumably might have voted against the charter school law expansion, but did not want to be to cross Lieutenant Governor Reeves. So that's why it's going to be so interesting. This bill is held on a motion to reconsider, and there's going to have to be another vote. It's going to be interesting to see how these people, whether they take another walk or whether they vote, and how they vote. So that'll be interesting to see if the charter school bill is held on a motion to reconsider.
And those 7 were all Republicans, right?
They were all Republican, and a lot of them were committee chairs. The only one from Northeast Mississippi was Rita Parks from up in Corinth, and in the past she has voted against charter school legislation. So it'll be interesting to see what she does this time around.
All right, good stuff, Bobby, and thank you all again for tuning in here to Capitol View. If you missed any of it or just want to watch it again, just watch the replay here at djournal.com. I'll also have the audio up on my blog a little bit later on at tipsheet.djournal.com. And if you want more from Bobby, check out today's episode of the Memo podcast. That'll be up before too long. You can listen to that for free on iTunes, your podcast app, or at memo.djournal.com. Give Bobby a follow on Twitter at BobbyHarrison9, and looking for more updates from him as the session rolls on in Jackson. Bobby, thanks for joining us, man. We'll do it again next week.
All right. Stay dry.
I'll try. Thank you.
Bye.